Josh?
Yeah.
I noticed that you were whittling something. And now I see that you're painting it with some bright red paint. Can you hold that up for me? It is. It's a dollar horse.
I don't know.
Wow.
You're whittling a dollar horse right now.
It's a whittle
Why
dollar
is that?
horse.
Does that have something to do with the place that you're in that you're going to make fun of, even though you don't know the specifics about its culture?
Yeah, no,
So whittle.
I will never respect any culture. I am here in Sweden, spending a few days in Stockholm before I go back to the United States.
Yeah, he loves it, but it is against his will.
Actually, it's the other way around. I'm here by my own volition, and the people here are so mean. Sweden. Okay, we have a number of Swedish listeners, and I need to know, Swedes, why are you people so fucking mean? I'm nice. I'm a nice guy. I promise. I've won rave reviews from many on my ability to conversationalize and just generally be a sociable individual. And you people don't like me. What's going on here? Because at least a few of you listen to the show. So please, sound off in the comments and defend your country.
They can see your Dutch. They can see it on your face, Josh. They can see your horrible Dutch nose.
Jesus Christ.
There's no good way to like bridge the language gap with Swedes because they're going to be arrogant about it one way or the other, right?
Yeah, because they all speak English. All
of them speak
100%.
English. You know, they still get like annoyed with you for deigning to speak English to them at all. And then
if you're speaking Danish,
and then if you ask them if they speak English, they're like, yeah. There's no good way around it, folks.
have you tried speaking any Swedish?
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the Worst of All Possible Worlds, the first and only podcast that will never, ever, ever speak Swedish. I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
Jag är den värsta av alla möjliga Brians.
And I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
This has been a bit of a difficult week for all of us as we've prepared this episode. It's
Yes.
undergone some real production issues, which is why it's out a day late.
Yes,
Yeah.
you see, we had recorded an entire episode, edited it all together.
Yeah, 2/3 of it had been colorized and everything.
Yeah, and we took it to a movie theater, as we are often to do, to screen our podcasts.
Yeah, every week.
Every week
We went down to
fly
the
out.
Alamo Draft House.
Yes, we rent out Alamo, and we bring our most trusted advisors, and
Yep.
by that I mean 12 cardboard cutouts of Roy Disney.
Yes,
and, we
and,
just,
and Devin Faraci in the corner.
Of course. So we screened this, and it turns out it was like an incomprehensible mess. There were just too many elements, right? There were too many things we were trying to do, too many bits in there. We got Sting to write 20 songs for us.
And they were all just lyric changes from The Last Ship. He has given up.
Yeah, he was just like, remember 2014, the time when Sting took over the world? Well, we can go back to there again, and we will forever.
So basically, as a result of this, Thomas Schumacher, who we also had, by the way, from
Yes.
Disney Theatricals, he's
Yes.
got
He's
the
on
option.
retainer.
He's got the option for the Worst of All Possible Worlds on Broadway. He basically said, hey, you guys have got to come up with a brand new version of this episode. So that's what we're doing today.
We're doing it in a very limited amount of time, and it's going to be tonally very different from the original because,
Yeah,
of course,
because we have to get this out in time for the Happy Meal toys.
That Cool Voltaire Happy Meal toy is going to go hard. No, but if any of that previous bit was inscrutable, now that we've done 2 consecutive classic bits, we are referencing the creation of Disney's film, The Emperor's New Groove. That's what we're here to talk about today. Well, more accurately, we're here to talk about a movie called The Sweatbox, which is an unreleased documentary about the making of The Emperor's New Groove.
They got a movie very, very close to the finish line. Like somewhere around 1/3 of it was like fully animated, including color. Then they decided to go another direction.
And I think the thing that I'm excited about with covering this today, and why I think it's going to be really cool for us to talk about, is that we all like creating stuff, obviously, and we've been involved in a lot of different projects, some of which have been very smooth, some of which have been very bumpy. And the process of making a piece of art, I mean, you can go back and listen to our episode about Sunday in the Park with George, right? It's something that we care about a great deal.
Yeah, what makes this notable is that this documentary, The Sweatbox, some of you listening have probably heard of this and seen it, But for the most part, this is not something that you can obtain legally in any form.
No.
Disney owns this documentary and therefore will not allow it to be released beyond a couple of obligatory, like, contractual releases that they did in 2002.
Right.
So you have to find a bootleg of it. There have been 2 bootlegs of it that have floated around the internet. One I remember being on Vimeo for one day, and I cannot find it anywhere now. That's a slightly different cut and higher quality. But everyone is usually just going off of a sort of low quality digital rip that's been on the torrent site since, like, I don't know, 2007.
And you will notice that the audio sounds very rough. And there are 2 reasons for this. The first one is that the rip itself is low quality. But the second is that this movie, this cut is still a work in progress.
It's unfinished.
And so there's a lot of scratch audio that hasn't been mastered yet.
Yeah, a lot of placeholder music.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you can see the time code the whole time on the screen, which even covers up some of the lower third titles for people's names and things.
Yeah, there's just like, well, here's another affable white guy. I will never know his name.
For a little bit of context, I guess we'll talk a little bit about Disney animation, right?
Yeah, Brian, you're a Disney adult. You know a thing or two about Disney.
I am
You're
something
wearing the
of a-
mouse ears right now.
That's right.
Yes, that's just my headphones. Every time you talk, there's a little Mr. Movie phone playing underneath telling me things about how you're not my real friends and things to buy. So
Wow.
Disney animation is this huge thing, right? The very first, like, inked cell animation feature was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. In Walt Disney's day, these animated features were these huge, expensive projects that always went over time, over budget, came out years apart from each other. And that would be sort of supplemented by, countless animated shorts and also features that were themselves sort of made up of vignettes, stuff like Fantasia or The Three Caballeros or Ichabod and Mr. Toad.
And of course, the studio is also able to supplement that work by contracting with the U.S. government.
Yes.
As well as a number of private titans of industry as well, which is why those partnerships, that's the thing that Walt Disney was really good at.
And it's also why you get to see Donald Duck in a Nazi regalia and heiling Hitler.
It's a dream. It's all a dream. And he's glad to
is.
be in the great US of A when he wakes up. The animated features, the big fairy tales that Walt Disney was so invested in to the point of almost ruining the company multiple times in his lifetime. These are, of course, like, I don't even have words for what they are. I don't have to explain or introduce the idea of an animated Disney fairy tale cartoon, right?
Yeah,
They
we've
have
seen Snow White, we've seen Cinderella.
Yeah.
You know what the thing is.
They have supplanted in the collective consciousness even the older versions of it. They're public
Right.
domain, but they're almost impossible to touch.
Disney's genius and what he was able to do was to take these public domain fairy tales and then monetize the shit out of them by making this iconic look that you cannot replicate.
And worth noting, too, that a lot of this was his brother, Roy Disney Sr., who was the real businessman of the family. So, of course, Walt Disney dies in the late 60s. And the company sort of ends up afloat. You have this one group of people who have no vision whatsoever, just trying to do stuff. You have another group in the company that has no vision whatsoever that's like, well, what would Walter do if he were still alive? Oh, God.
Probably smoke this pack of cigarettes, I'd imagine.
One of those people, of course, being the aforementioned Roy Disney, Disney Jr., who is Roy
His son
Sr.'s
who takes
son.
over. Yeah.
So Walt's nephew.
Yeah. So Disney has to survive. There's actually a pretty good documentary directed by Don Hahn, who was one of the producers at Disney Animation, called Waking Sleeping Beauty, that Disney actually produced and did put out, that I think makes Disney look less flattering than the Sweatbox does, but we'll get there. And he's talking about what's called the Disney Renaissance, right? The 70s and 80s, Disney kind of slogs through it. So we have this period called the Disney Renaissance, right? Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg, they had taken Paramount by storm, and they get this job at Disney. And it's just a shambles. The animated movies from the 70s, some of them are real hits like Robin Hood, starring Canada's Brian Bedford in the title role. Some of them are The Rescuers, which is fine. Weirdly dark, like kind of hilariously, like kind of a fun one to watch again as an adult if you haven't seen it in a long time. Then there's kind of like The Fox and the Hound, which is, I feel like, a very depressing.
It's a depressing movie. It's also boring as shit.
Yeah,
like, it's so hard. I think it
Pearl
is at
Bailey
most...
can't keep that whole fucking thing afloat by herself.
I mean, a lot of these movies from this era, I think, have been like rehabilitated in the public conscience more recently.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they just aren't very good movies. It's just that they look like Disney, and they're able to coast on that.
And I mean, they all look great. The animation still is good, even on the cheaper ones like Robin Hood. You know, and then you have like this huge, expensive Nightmare, The Black Cauldron, based on the Prydain novels. Katzenberg is coming in while Black Cauldron is basically in post-production. Basically, we have this leadership of Roy Disney Jr., Jeffrey Katzenberg, and Michael Eisner, plus a guy named Frank Wells. Frank Wells was, for all intents and purposes, the mediator between these three men who otherwise hated each other.
Sure. Yeah.
But Frank Wells is really into extreme sports and would do, what is it called where you like jump out of a helicopter to go skiing?
Heli-skiing.
Is it just called heli-skiing? Is that what it's called?
I mean, generally you don't jump out of the helicopter. The helicopter just kind of puts you down and you get out of it.
Well, you know what I mean. Instead of a lift,
but
you
maybe he did that.
Maybe.
I mean,
look,
either way, he was in a helicopter and it fell down to the ground and he died.
as helicopters are wont to do.
So Frank Wells died in a helicopter crash. And this was at the point where the Disney Renaissance was at its peak, right? They had been nominated for Best Picture. That was the first time an actual Disney animated movie was nominated for Best Picture.
For Beauty and the Beast, right?
Yeah, for Beauty and the Beast. You know, so they had Little Mermaid, they'd had Beauty and the Beast, they'd had Aladdin. Disney animation was back. Not only were the movies good, they were making tons of money. And now there was like this prestige to it, too. And Katzenberg kept chasing after the Oscar after that.
And that's the other thing, too, is that such a big piece of what they were able to unlock was this winning formula. And a lot of that was on the strength of, yes, the classic animation, but it was also the adaptations of these fairy tales and things that I guess felt folkloric, even if they really weren't. And of course, the music. These were movies that were now sort of being done generally in the style of a traditional musical comedy.
This is what Alan Menken and Howard Ashman like brought to the table.
Alan Menken and Howard Ashman had a massive off-Broadway musical hit with their adaptation of Little Shop of Horrors. And Little Shop of Horrors then got its own great Frank Oz movie. And Disney would kind of alternate between Alan Menken and getting some kind of famous, you know, like record label singer, right? Someone like they did this with Robin Hood in the 70s. They got Roger Miller to play the rooster and sing those folk songs. And Roger Miller's not a huge name now, but he was a big enough name then. Oliver and Company in the 80s, they got Billy Joel.
Well,
right?
a number of others. Oliver and Company was a big pop score that had a lot of compositions by a lot of different musicians.
And so they do this again with Elton John and then make the most money anyone has ever made forever.
And then, you know, they also go back to Broadway every once in a while, especially after Howard Ashman dies, right?
Yeah.
They bring on Stephen Schwartz, who they had already been working with a lot before.
Tim
but
Rice
then,
and Stephen Schwartz become kind of house lyricists. And Schwartz, really good composer, pretty phenomenal lyricist. So around the time that Frank Wells dies, The Lion King is coming out and Pocahontas is in production as well. You kind of have these two movies all kind of going on at the same time. Disney, for a long time, released its animated movies on a strict 7-year cycle, right? Snow White came out 7 years ago. It goes back into theaters. Other movies, any theater could just be like, hey, we want to show House on Haunted Hill. You know, you go to whatever studio that is, and then they're like, here you go. You know, this much money, you put it in your theater. Disney was always like scheduled re-releases of everything. And I was talking to my mom about this. Whenever she saw a Disney movie as a kid, it cost more.
Sure.
It was more expensive going to an old Disney movie.
And Disney's always been a premium product, right? They did this with their home video releases as well.
it's going back in the vault.
They held off on home video for their animated features until this Renaissance era, until the late 80s. Their idea here was every time they put a movie out on home video, that means they're not going to make that kind of money when they re-release it in theaters. They still do some re-releases in theaters. I remember seeing The Little Mermaid on a re-release in theaters. Beauty and the Beast shows up in IMAX, you know. But what they're thinking is we need a theatrical replacement. So every time a classic comes out on tape, There needs to be a brand new movie. Then they have this schedule of basically putting out 2 movies a year by the end of the 90s. And so you have Pocahontas, which is going to be the prestige picture. This is the big one. This is the one they're putting tons of money into. This is the one where they're getting big stars like Mel Gibson. They're getting people like Russell Means. They're really trying to do like cultural sensitivity. They launched the theme park. This is the first Disney theme park musical, and it launches before the movie comes out.
Oh, building hype through musical.
Then The Lion King is happening alongside it. Also pretty epic in scope. Also has a lot of big names in it, right? They've got Whoopi.
Yeah.
They've got Jeremy Irons, James Earl
They got
Jones.
Matthew Broderick.
They've got Jonathan Taylor Thomas, Nathan Lane. And The Lion King has a bit of a troubled production. They have to fire one of the directors on it. And Roger Allers ends up being co-director, but also kind of the lead of the directorial team on The Lion King. Pocahontas, as we know from history, doesn't do especially well in theaters, either critically, awards-wise, or commercially.
I think if they had added in one more animal sidekick, I think that really would have fixed Pocahontas' problems.
That was the other thing about the farm. Why did they always have to have the fucking animal sidekicks? What was that?
You can see in the formula, they came up with a storytelling formula from a guy named Christopher Vogler, who himself was pulling from The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell, but he made a simple sort of circular formula, call to adventure, rejecting the call, all that shit, right? When people talk about the Joseph Campbell formula, they're usually actually talking about Christopher Vogler's formula. So the old Disney movies, of course, they're a little bit more poetic, right? When Walt Disney himself is in charge, it's like Snow White, nothing even happens for like half an hour in the middle of that thing. She's just hanging out in a hut.
It's more about like showing off the animation.
And yeah, a Disney movie going all the way back to the beginning, and even with this formula, doesn't work off of a script. It might work off of an outline, but people are pitching scene by scene. And that's how and so it's animators really telling the story, and then it kind of goes back over to the writers, and it's a very collaborative, workshoppy, theater-like process.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the 90s, even though there's this really strong formula that's always like, yeah, we're going to have a villain, everything's going to be large scale, then there's going to be like a wedding at the end every time. To a
the
point where
villain's going to be a homosexual, except for
It's
Claude
going to be a
Frollo.
homosexual.
But Claude
Is going to be
Frollo is maybe
animated
also
by
gay? Question mark.
is going to be animated by Andreas Dea, who's a gay German man who just makes
Yes.
every villain gay.
Oh my God.
Yes.
I love him.
And by the end of the 90s, this is starting to wear thin, right? And there's always a sidekick for the good guy, and there's always a sidekick for the bad guy. As they're working on the next project, Roger Allers saw the secondary project through to completion to becoming this huge box office hit that then has become the highest grossing Broadway musical of all time. And the Broadway grosses are a fraction of the overall grosses of The Lion King, the musical, because it's a global stage phenomenon with productions happening in I don't know how many countries at this point.
And so much of the success of The Lion King was that they were sort of able to incorporate these elements of a specific place, a specific setting. The idea that we are actually there on the African Serengeti, I guess, or more accurately, a whole bunch of like white American guys' perception of what the Serengeti is, as accomplished through a good deal of visual research.
So the producers in Disney Animation were trying to get a hold of Sting for a long time to nail him. I don't know why. I don't know why you'd think like this guy knows how to write a musical, because that's so not his style.
No, it's not. But in terms of tone and mood, I completely understand why Disney goes after Sting.
His music is very melancholy, right?
Yes.
He's a moody Brit. That's his whole deal.
It's also very introspective, right?
Yes.
But it's romantic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You listen to Fields of Gold and it inspires in you this sort of like longing that like Disney capitalized on in several of its previous animated pictures. So I'd be like, what does a Disney Sting movie look like?
And at the point where they finally get a hold of him, it's 1996, Roger Allers, director of The Lion King, has this idea of doing a story set in the Inca Empire. I could see maybe some of this fitting. Sting is in his world music phase, right? He's this guy who's gotten really into tantra, and he likes using all kinds of folk instruments. And as we see in this one, he goes to Nepal during the production of this movie.
And you can also see how Disney, the company, might think that this would be a good bet because John and Rice were able to put forward something pretty compelling in The Lion King.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of trying to do something similar here. They're trying to sort of recapture that lightning in a bottle.
I also am of the opinion that most songwriters worth their salt have a secret desire to write a musical. I think there's just something inside of them that it's like, I have used up all of my own lived experience. How cool would it be to write for somebody else's lived experience and have them go through a journey? I'm gonna shoot my shot here, but I think that the new Taylor Swift album is going to be very musical-esque in structure because that is an artist who is desperate to write for the stage.
Well, I mean, she wrote that song for Cats.
She sure did.
So that's another indicator that she does want to write a musical. So they get a hold of Sting. He's really hard to nail down over the course of the production of this movie, which, by the way, at this point is called Empire of the Sun. That's an indicator of how much things are going to change.
Yes.
Over the course of this movie, Sting quits 4 or 5 times. We see a couple of those times.
It's so funny.
Not everyone.
But no, it was a lot more than that. And one of the things that they had to do to nail him down, I don't know whose idea this was, but Sting's wife, the actress and producer Trudy Styler, they were like, what if we got her to produce a behind-the-scenes documentary?
Yeah.
Does that sound good? Does that sound like a lot of fun? Maybe we could team her up with like a trusted BBC director like John Paul Davidson. You know, she had just come off of producing Snatch. So Trudy Styler comes in and makes the best behind-the-scenes documentary about animation, I think, ever.
Yeah.
Right? Because not only is this a great movie about a troubled production, not only is it a great movie about a specific time in Disney's history, it is a great movie about the process of making an animated movie, period. Layouts, animatics, storyboards, the whole thing.
It's pretty indicative from the very beginning of this movie that this is not going to be what you expect from a Disney documentary. Because if you've seen other Disney documentaries about the making of their movies, it's all polish, it's all flash. They are trying their level best to make the studio look as good as possible. And that is not what we hear at the very beginning of this movie.
We're upstairs in this meeting right now, and it's going to determine the fate of our whole project, right?
We're not all looking for jobs. We're not panicking and going, oh, they've killed the movie. I mean, I suppose that's still a possibility.
Are we brutally just mutilating this thing?
I've also heard that if none of the outlines strike Peter as brilliant, then they might completely shove the project.
All of these animators are speaking in hushed tones because they clearly don't want to be overheard.
This is the day of the pivotal meeting that decides whether the movie continues or gets completely thrown in the trash.
And from this clip, we go straight to the card, which says Sweatbox. Definitions: 1, solitary confinement. 2, colloquial U.S. screening room. Origin: when Walt Disney set up his studio in Burbank, the screening room was a wooden shack with no air conditioning. And then 3, colloquial Australian. See also Ghoulie Guard. Is this a joke? What is this? I don't know.
Australians weigh in the comments. Let us know.
Ghoulie Guard? I don't
Ghoulie
think that's
Guard?
anything.
Ghoulie?
I Googled this. I did not find any
Is that
results.
like
You
what the
ghoulied
fuck
it,
is going
Josh.
on?
You ghoulied it.
Maybe it's like, hold on. Maybe it's like Ghoulie. Maybe it's your balls. Maybe it's a cup.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Like
it's
your
your guard to your
ghoulies.
ghoulies. Australians, sound
Australians.
off, please. I have no idea. Do you
I
call?
mean, that would-
do you
no, that
refer
would
to your
make sense.
testicles as ghoulies? Yeah, no. When Grabbed by the Ghoulies got released over there, they had to change the name to Grabbed by the Cuzco.
What's his name?
You did that as Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I just had a nightmare about his version of The Emperor's New Groove on Broadway.
There's something that is so like striking about this intro, right? Because Disney is trying to present itself not as a company where people work, but as a magic factory.
The Dream Factory. They call the people who design the parks the Imagineers.
Yeah.
Right? It is not so much that things are made as they are plucked out of the collective dream consciousness of America and
That's a good
thrown
point.
onto a page, which is why I think they've never released this film.
Yeah.
Because it shows the actual process that goes behind it and the people who are responsible for it and makes them bigger than the movie itself.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing because Walt was the original, like, let's draw you in. Let's show you how all the movies are made. He had his own TV show every week.
Yeah.
The Wonderful World of Color would be like, and here's what went into Pirates of the Caribbean. But it's Walter Elias Disney himself curating exactly what you see in that process.
Hey there, you are listening to a preview of a premium episode of The Worst of All Possible Worlds. If you'd like to listen to the rest of this, head on over to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/worstofall. And you can listen to not only the rest of this episode, but our entire backlog of premium episodes, bonus episodes, and if you subscribe at the $10 tier, you will get an extra episode of the podcast every single month. Again, that is patreon.com/worstofall. Hope to see you there.